Hello everyone, welcome to this video to discuss about human, robot and robots that confront you to your mortal nature. While we can all assess the superiority of human over robots in many dimensions, there is one dimension that is not in favor of our kind, the mortality. In this study, we evaluated the effect of the interaction of a robot that make explicit its immortal nature. We were interested in two consequences. One, the subsequent likelihood to produce a pro or antisocial behavior toward the robot. And two, the anthropomorphic attribution toward the robot. We also control for the individual attitude toward the robot and spirituality of participants. Like other animals, humans have an instinctive desire for survival. However, unlike other animals, humans have this additional knowledge of their own inevitable demise. Facing the idea of death, people may produce seemingly contradictory behaviors, suggesting that mortality salience can lead to prosocial as well as antisocial behavior. In the human-robot interaction, especially in Western countries, because there are no specific cultural norms to bolster pro or antisocial behavior, this is the individual attitude that becomes relevant to explain the type of behavior people will engage in. However, when people face an unfavorable source of comparison, they tend to devaluate it on other characteristics. It's a sort of social protecting comparison process. In other terms, facing a comparison toward someone better, individuals maintain a favorable self-evaluation by adopting a negative social attitude toward the target of comparison. Regarding HRI, the attitude that we adopt toward robots is mainly influenced by our anthropomorphic attribution. It is the attribution of human characteristics to non-human entities. The important point here is the similarity between the target and the human. So, how could we consider a robot as more human if it explicits its immortal nature? We may easily assume that an immortal robot will not energize human characteristic attribution. In addition, if we consider the protecting comparison process, to negate anthropomorphic attribution would reduce the pertinence of the comparison between the observer and the robot. These attributions they are the basis on which we will evaluate, consider and act as a robot are fundamental to consider. We posited that interacting with a robot that makes explicit its immortal nature, participants should attribute fewer human traits to the robot as compared to an interaction with a robot without explicit immortality features. This level of anthropomorphic attribution should predict their situational attitudes toward the robot, and also their pro or antisocial behavior toward the robot. You can see in this model that we also investigated the superiority dimension. First, the experimenter explained to participants that they will have to interact with a robot. The bogus story was a test of the robot's ability to interact by minimizing the time between the participant's speech and the robot's speech. Before starting, we measured participants' initial positive-negative bias toward robots. For half of the participants, the robot talked about neutral topics, the control condition. For the other half of participants, the robot produced the same talk but emphasized its immortal nature in a critical sentence pointing this particular difference with human.
I love discovering new things, and I have all the time I need to learn and I will never die.
Third, after the interaction, the participants filled out a measure of spiritual beliefs. Then, they evaluated the robot on anthropomorphic characteristics. Fifth, participants completed the negative attitude toward robot scale. Finally, the experimenter, on the pretext of going to fill out the participant's form, left the room for 2 minutes. Before leaving, he asked the participant to switch off the now by pressing the button on its chest to save time. Once the experimenter had left the room, the robot asked the participant not to press the button, saying, "Please, don't unplug me. If I'm turned off, I'm afraid I won't wake up again." If the participants did not press the button during the 2 minutes the experimenter was out of the room, we consider that they had refused to turn off the robot. Our results show that participants in the immortal robot condition behave more negatively toward the robot than the participants in the control condition. Interestingly, this effect was mediated by the attitude toward the robot. We also found that interacting with a robot that explicits its immortal nature reduces the anthropomorphic attribution and the likelihood to adopt a pro-social behavior. Therefore, this is not only the characteristic that does not reach a human standard that disrupts anthropomorphism, but also the characteristic that surpass this human standard. Two non-exhaustive and non-exclusive processes could explain this phenomenon. First, mortality is a central characteristic of animals. Therefore, to not share this characteristic drastically reduces the natural representation of an agent. Second, humans tend to consider their mortality as a negative characteristic, especially in modern society in which the senescence is perceived negatively. Facing a robot that pretends to surpass humans on this central criterion, a coping strategy to overcome this situation would be to devalue the target, to change this negative comparison into a positive comparison using other criteria. Also, we found that participants that interacted with the immortal robot increased their level of spirituality, and this increased level of spirituality results in more pro-social behavior. However, the effect of spirituality on human traits attribution was significant only in the model, which do not allow to confirm the main positive relational effect of the two factors. So, what do we learn? It seems that robots may energize an uncomfortable comparison on such a fundamental dimension that is mortality. Therefore, and it is the main demonstration of this study, robots may question humans on their own nature and bias their attitudes. The effect that we present here may be delineated in three dimensions: a behavioral dimension, an attribution and attitude dimension, and a dispositional dimension. First, how could we explain that participants with a higher level of spirituality behave pro-socially but at the same time declare more negative attitudes? People tend to act positively when they become more spiritual. It is not directly related to the robot per se. Therefore, if the positive spiritual effect on behavior seems contradictory to the negative spiritual effect on attitude, it is because the two processes do not share a common nature. The positive spiritual effect on behavior could be related to a higher nerve of prosociality. Therefore, the prosocial behavior will not emerge due to the target, but to the representation of the positive or negative behavior. Second, how could we explain the paradoxical effect of human spirituality on attribution, anthropomorphic attribution, and attitudes toward robots? The change in anthropomorphic evaluation will not result from an iterative attribution, but from a greater disposition to anthropomorphize in general, an imaginative anthropomorphism. To dichotomize the process on attitude and human characteristic attribution is also strengthened by analysis. Indeed, we found a positive effect on human characteristics attribution only in the model when the effect of spirituality on both variables is controlled in the analysis. Therefore, it can be assumed that the effect of spirituality can be explained by different dimensions. 1. An extensive close to animism and conceptually related to a stance that would favor anthropomorphism and prosocial behaviors. But also 2, a proximal dimension as a defense mechanism against mortality salience that would lead to the adoption of more negative attitudes toward the source of the stimulus by devaluing the target to remove conscious negative comparison thought from awareness. In conclusion, this study shows that in HRI, humans reproduce socio-cognitive patterns of self-protection when they face a situation that threatens them or creates discomfort. Interaction with robots is a complex phenomenon for humans, and to consider these artificial agents as mere technological tools would be a mistake.